I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, welcome to episode 39. Today's episode is all about a lesser-known Maryland monster referred to as the Sykesville monster, named for the town it was seen in. As it always seems to happen, once I started looking into the story, it turned into a couple of other stories and eventually morphed into sightings of a Bigfoot-type creature throughout the state of Maryland. Maryland, for any lurkers who are not familiar with this state, is a small state located on the east coast of the United States. It has the Appalachian Mountain Range in the west and the Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic Ocean on the eastern coast. Approximately 40 miles of the Appalachian Trail snakes through the state. It's also home to the famous Mason-Dixon line that marks the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. Maryland isn't a very large state. It ranks 42 out of 50 for size, so it wouldn't seem like the place you'd find much in the way of monsters. But Maryland has several monsters. We've talked about the snallygaster already in episode 27. In addition to the snallygaster, Maryland has the goat man, the deweo, the Chesapeake Bay monster, who is affectionately known as Chessie, the snarly owl, the eel poot, and the Sykesville monster. For this episode, we are just sticking with the Sykesville monster, but we will be covering the others in future episodes. Also important to note, there are some publications that try to lump some of these creatures together as the same thing, claiming the snallygaster, eel poot, snarly owl, and the deweo are all common names for Bigfoot, which is completely not true. Just a quick insight, the deweo is wolf-like, the snarly owl is more like a hellhound, and of course the snallygaster is a giant flying lizard thing. You can hear about the snallygaster in episode 27, as I mentioned. Despite its small size, Maryland actually ranked 5th in the United States for Bigfoot sightings in 2001, according to famed Bigfoot researcher John Green's personal statistical database. I don't think it's number 5 anymore, if it ever actually was, but it definitely had more sightings than I expected. And more sightings in a very small rural area than I expected too. There were some sources that claimed the history of Sasquatch in Maryland dated back to the 1600s and to the local Native American tribes. They were using the Piscataway Indians and a god that they believed in called Oki, but I really didn't find anything that seemed to actually fit that scenario. Also, within that same resource, they claimed that an account from Beauchamp Plantagenet in the 17th century referred to something that they called a camel mare, and camel here is spelled with 2 L's. The account read, "In the head of the Chesapeake Bay was seen a camel mare, brown-black skin, 7 foot high, of which 300-mile westward area a store of them, their skins bought and sold by Indians to confirm it." So basically it was saying there was this creature, 7 feet tall, brown-black skin, and that there were a whole bunch of them 300 miles to the west of the Chesapeake Bay, and the Indians bought and sold the skins, and that confirmed this creature. So this research was trying to say that this was proof, this was probably a Bigfoot that they were talking about. But, while some try to say this is Bigfoot, a little bit of common sense and a tiny bit of research made me think this is actually a buffalo, which, in the 16 to 1700s, had a range that included areas of western Maryland. a camel mare makes me think more buffalo on four legs like a camel rather than a bipedal Bigfoot. It was a little disappointing that I was able to discredit that entire thing because I was like, oh, this is really interesting, an account of a Bigfoot in the 17th century. Nope, just a buffalo. Doesn't look anything like a Bigfoot. And in case you're wondering, I looked up the height of a buffalo, and buffalo bulls are actually pretty tall and could be, I don't think they could be 7 feet tall, but they were pretty darn tall, and I could see where somebody would say it was close to 7 feet tall. They're big. Big-ass buffalo. They make good jerky. But just because this one account most likely has a logical explanation, it doesn't mean that they all do. Between 1900 and 1944, there were about 42 Maryland monster reports. In Chestertown, Maryland and Kent County, over on the eastern shore, a man by the name of M.P. Edwards shared a story from back in the early 1900s when he was a kid. Mr. Edwards and his brother went out late at night to try and figure out what had been mysteriously slaughtering their baby calves. On this night, they heard an awful moaning sound coming from the nearby woods. When they went to inspect further, they found large human-like footprints. Terrified, the brothers abruptly ended their investigation and went home. In Dorchester County, also on the eastern shore of the state, a 1909 report mentions the account of Albert Evans, a local farmer. Evans was out surveying his farmland in a horse and buggy when he reportedly saw a dark-haired 7-foot-tall man-beast standing over several dead cows. Skipping ahead to 1957, on August 1st, Mr. and Mrs. Reverdy Garner of Upper Marlboro, Prince George's County, Maryland, had an unnerving experience. Prince George's County is down towards the southern end of Maryland. The couple was pulling into their driveway when they were startled by a large gorilla-like creature with red beady eyes standing in their way. As Mr. Garner slowed the vehicle, the creature was struck. Mr. Garner then began to retreat and started backing up his vehicle with the creature in pursuit. There is no further information on what happened, but I'm going to hazard a guess and say the thing ran off. In the late spring, early summer of 1973, there was a cluster of sightings. May 1973, Sykesville resident Anthony Dorsey went outside to check on his dogs who were barking. He shined his flashlight into the woods and picked up 2 glowing eyes in the tree line. The eyes were spread far apart across the front of the face. He never saw the body, but the eyes were about 7 feet above the ground. Anthony Dorsey was considered to be a credible witness. He was a firefighter and a member of the community his entire life. His sighting also coincided with other sightings in the area around the same time. It's interesting that he mentions the eyes were on the front of the face. This seemingly small detail rules out most common woodland creatures, like deer. Also, the fact that the eyes were spread far apart rules out your smaller animals like raccoon or owls up in the trees. After Anthony Dorsey's sighting, there was a sighting by a truck driver who preferred to remain anonymous. He said the creature he saw stood approximately 7 to 8 feet tall and appeared to be dark brown in color. It could have been a man on stilts. Whatever it was seemed to be caked with mud from the waist down. It appeared to be sitting down when the thing, which was minding his own business, stood up, turned around, and then, sensing danger, ran off into the woods. The truck driver was unable to pinpoint the exact location of the sighting. The Baltimore Afro-American newspaper did a story on the sighting, and as a result, John Lutz, director of Odyssey Scientific Research in Baltimore, investigated the sighting. Lutz talked to the truck driver and also found an additional eyewitness who saw the monster. Lutz was reluctant to classify the creature and stated that at the present time, his corporation was listing the incident as an unidentified prowler until more information is gathered and more positive identification was made. Mr. Lutz stated that recordings were being made of each witness's account in order to form a verbal record which will be studied by veterinarians, zoologists, and biologists. Mr. Lutz also said the entire incident could be the work of a prankster. He said, "It's very possible that a prankster will call the police department and say it was a big joke." But the residents of Sykesville's Oklahoma Hill were not joking. A Mrs. Agnes Dorsey, mother of witness Anthony Dorsey, thought more should be done to either capture or destroy whatever it was. She said, "They should have gangs of men out looking for it. I hope it's caught." Anthony Dorsey said the creature has been seen in Woodstock and Marriottsville, Maryland as well, which are only about 6 miles from the Sykesville area. Some people believe that what might have been seen was an escaped patient from Springfield State Hospital. This is a mental hospital in case you're wondering. According to Dr. Fred Pokras, who was superintendent of Springfield at the time, there was not an unusual number of escapes reported, and none with big feet. "We always have a certain number who leave without permission," he said, but added nothing out of the ordinary had come to his attention. Dr. Pokras did say that within the last 2 weeks, around the time of the sightings, 10 or 12 people had taken unauthorized leaves. I'm pretty sure unauthorized leaves is a polite way of saying escaped. Maybe that's just me. Included in that number were 1 or 2 persons considered dangerous to themselves or others. I personally do not think that what was seen was someone from Springfield. The witnesses that came forward were reliable, and the officials at the hospital not overly concerned. There were more than 20 sightings between May and June of 1973. The majority described an 8-foot-tall creature, some said it was grayish-white, and it was hair-covered and ape-like. One person saw the 8-foot creature walking through her backyard, and another saw an ape-like beast caked in mud, running from the side of Route 32 into the woods near the Patapsco River. Anthony Norris reported finding footprints in his backyard measuring 13.5 inches long and nearly 6 inches wide. Several residents reported a creature between 7 and 10 feet tall. June 1973, the Morning Herald in Hagerstown, Maryland, reported that the Maryland State Police were searching for a hairy monster. Police were using a helicopter with searchlights to look for the creature. State Trooper Don Higgins, who was the investigating officer of record, said the sightings seemed genuine. The Sykesville creature was said to have killed several dogs and a cow. The residents refused to accept the explanation that it was an escaped circus gorilla or a deformed bear. Is it just me, or does it seem like there's an awful lot of escaped circus gorillas? That seems to be the go-to explanation. It's like when you see a UFO, it's a weather balloon. If you see Bigfoot, escaped circus gorilla. The Baltimore Zoo assistant director was called in to examine the footprints that were found, the ones that were 13.5 inches long by about 6 inches wide. And he said he determined the footprint was from a large human foot with fallen arches. That's a pretty big foot. And that brings us to May 9th, 1981. This particular sighting is the one that really defines this entire Sykesville monster case. If you look up the Sykesville monster, this is the sighting that you're going to see a lot of information about. Mostly because the gentleman who witnessed the creature went on later to make a report to the BFRO, which is the Bigfoot Research Organization. And when he wasn't getting information readily from local authorities, he started his own investigation. But you're going to find out about that in just a minute, because I'm going to tell you about it. So May 9th, 1981, the day was sunny, there was a light breeze, and the temperature was around 60 degrees. A gentleman by the name of Lon Strickler was out fly fishing for red-eye and smallmouth bass in the south branch of the Patapsco River near Sykesville, about 1 mile downstream from Route 32. The area of the river he was fishing on flattens out into riffles before emptying into a larger pool. Riffles are the shallower, faster-moving areas of water where the rocks have usually broken the surface. Just so you understand the terminology. Lon Strickler had fished this particular area many times before. On this day, he was fishing from the south bank near the riffles when he notices a stray dog sniffing around the brush on the opposite side of the river, about 50 yards away. The dog was going in and out of the thickets, but wasn't a problem, so Lon put it out of his mind and continued fishing. After a few minutes, Lon hears the dog barking and growling. He assumes the dog must have scared up a deer, but when he looks in the direction of the dog, he sees a dark, hairy creature bobbing up and down in the thickets. He stopped fishing and moved closer to the riffles to get a better look, and realized the dog had stopped barking. The following is from Lon Strickler's BFRO report. I heard a loud yelp from the dog, and the creature stood up. The best I could tell is that the thing was about 7 to 8 feet tall and had dark matted hair. I could only see the body from the chest up because the rest of the body was obscured by the weeds and thickets. I stood completely still and could hear a series of tick sounds while observing this creature walk slowly through the thickets towards the woods. I started to follow it, and in the meantime I noticed a strong, musky scent that reminded me of fox urine. I had waders on, so I could only move so fast in an attempt to get a better look at this creature. It simply moved too fast for me. I decided to go back to my car, drive to Sykesville, and make an immediate report to the authorities. On my way back to the vehicle, I noticed the dog, and it had noticeable blood around the neck and hind area, but seemed to be able to get around. I figure I better stay away from the dog regardless. So Lon gets in his car and he heads to the nearest phone. This, of course, is well before cell phones are around. And he finds the phone located in a nearby bar. He calls the local police and he's told to go back to the area and they would meet him there. So he heads back over to the river and is surprised that there is a Maryland State Police cruiser already there. The state trooper tells Lon to get back into his car and leave immediately because they didn't know how dangerous the situation was. Lon tried to explain to the officer that he was the person who made the initial report, but the state trooper refused to let him talk and again told him to leave. About an hour later, he goes back and the place is crawling with people and both state and other official vehicles. One man standing near the road did share that someone had found hair samples, but refused to say anything else. Lon Strickler tried for years to get more information from local authorities, but he's been told there is no information available, or that there isn't any report of an incident in the first place. So Lon Strickler started his own investigation, uncovering several different reports that included a utility shed break-in and several chicken pens that were broken into in Gaither, Sykesville, Woodstock, Daniels, and Ellicott City, Maryland, which are all in the area of the South Branch of the Patapsco River. Most of the sightings were within the Patapsco Valley State Park. Lon Strickler mentions that Patapsco Valley State Park has a history of unusual activities like UFOs, paranormal, and cryptids. I was completely not aware of this information. I am definitely going to be looking into this claim. I actually got married at Patapsco Valley State Park, and my great-uncle, who was like a grandfather to me, he was superintendent there for a time. And growing up, I spent a lot of time at Patapsco Valley State Park. I've never heard of these claims. I'm definitely going to be checking that out. I'm definitely making a trip down to Patapsco Valley. It is on my list of things to do. Check out what's going on at Patapsco Valley State Park. Lon Strickler found a retired forensic artist to draw what he had seen. After describing in detail what he saw to the artist, he received the sketch, and the artist included a note that said, "Are you sure this is what you witnessed? It looks like a rendering of early man, except for a few features." A few years after Lon's encounter, he came upon an older gentleman while fishing near Piney Run, near Marriottsville, Maryland. Lon had been testing out a new fly fishing rod upstream and ended up engaging the man named Phil. Phil mentioned that skeletal remains of a large human had been found on the Piney Run south bank, not far from where they were standing. Phil went on to say that another fisherman had come upon the bones while he wandered off trail. After the discovery, the guy simply mentioned to a few other fishermen that there were bones in that direction. Phil said he and a companion walked over to the other side of the stream to check out the remains. Some of the bones were obviously missing, but there was a skull, missing a jawbone, some vertebrae, a few ribs, and long bones of the arms and legs. There was no visible tissue, but there were a few small, desiccated patches of reddish-brown fur scattered around. Phil said that he and his companion both wondered where the clothes were, and also that it was too large to be a human. Phil and his companion walked to a local convenience store to call the police. As they waited for authorities to arrive, Phil used his fish measuring tape and measured the upper arm bone, and he said it was about 22 inches long. The average length of a humerus, which is the long arm bone that was measured, in humans it's about 12 inches if it's a male, and a female it's about 11 inches. So 22 inches is about double what a normal size humerus bone is. Phil thought it was something similar to a large ape, and the skull, he said, looked almost human, but much larger. The Baltimore County Police and Maryland State Police arrived on scene and told everyone to leave the area. They placed crime scene tape across the road so no one could get within about 300 yards of the location. Phil and a few others stayed at the general store so they could see who was coming and going from the scene. There were unmarked helicopters bringing people on site as well as several unmarked vehicles. There was never any mention on the local news. After Lon Strickler began his own investigation, he received a comment about the incident that he had, and it said, "This sure brings up some old memories. I always expected that sooner or later it would get out. I'm glad someone else saw it and kicked over the can. I'll add the beans." I was one of the responders on the call. That would be Lon's call to the police. Right after we'd closed down the road, a government response team arrived. Those guys weren't fooling around. Their big dogs and bigger guns made that evident. It wasn't long before we were locked out, ordered into our cruisers and away from the area. The into our cruisers was the weirdest. We were outmanned, outgunned, and outranked by the feds who had taken over. Soon after that, within an hour at most, several choppers were overhead, as in 3. It was a manhunt on a larger scale than we could have mustered so quickly, and that's saying a lot. I've never really been positive what happened. None of our guys had actually seen it, though I imagine it was caught or killed. They said there were hair samples and footprint photos and casts taken. We were debriefed and basically instructed not to speak of this matter. With that, I'll close and say no more except that it did happen as described on here. A BFRO investigator, who looked into Lon Strickler's account, said that he contacted both the Maryland State Police and the Sykesville Police Department, but could not verify police response as they do not keep records of non-criminal reports back that far. In 1988, there was a Baltimore Sun article about Bigfoot sightings in the McKeldin area of the Patapsco Valley State Park. There were reports of weird cries at night. One frequent camper there claimed there were 6 creatures living in the park that resembled cavemen or gorillas, but that they could also take the form of wolves and other wildlife. They could disappear and float in the air. He went on to say that aliens dropped the creatures from a UFO into Liberty Reservoir in the 1970s. The creatures have glowing red eyes, can read minds, and have a powerful oily odor. I'm not really sure what to think of this whole report. On one hand, there are several points that are similar in many other reports, like the odor and the red eyes, but he loses me with the whole shape-shifting thing. In Marriottsville, Maryland in 1998, around 7 p.m., a husband and wife and the wife's mother were returning home from an outing in Washington, D.C. The husband and wife were traveling on Marriottsville Road in a full-size pickup truck, and the mother was following behind in a car. The husband and wife suddenly saw a huge, hairy, bipedal animal less than 100 feet away, step out of the woods to their right, cross the road in 5 or 6 steps, then disappear amongst the trees and shrubs on their left. The husband slowed his truck and turned on his high beams, and the couple saw the thing very clearly. It was huge, about 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown or black fur, and walking on 2 legs. It remained in profile position and never faced the oncoming vehicles. The wife said she could see the fur moving as it walked. When her son-in-law had turned on his high beams, the mother driving behind him did as well, and because of a bend in the road, she was also able to see the creature. When they neared the area in the road where the creature had been, all 3 adults smelled what they called a strong skunk-like odor. They became uneasy and sped off. The husband said, "I have been a hunter and outdoorsman for many years, and I have never seen anything like this. We feel like we stepped out of the Twilight Zone." 2 different local residents also reported hearing nocturnal wails around the same time frame as the husband, wife, and mother saw the creature in the road. Our final account comes from the summer of 2000 in Anne Arundel County, which is roughly about 30 minutes from Sykesville. On August 1st, 2000, the Baltimore Sun had a headline reading, "Policemen and workers track roaming 12-foot creature." Bricklayers Jerry Workman and Chuck Vance were working on the new Arundel Mills Mall. On July 30th, 2000, just before midnight, they were preparing to go to bed in their van. They were short on cash and had not yet received their first paycheck, and they had been granted permission to sleep on the job site. At 12:30 a.m. on what would have been July 31st, Jerry has the urge to get up and go to the bathroom, and their van is parked right near a porta potty, or spot-a-pot, or Johnny on the spot. You know, the portable toilet, basically, is what it is. So when he steps out of the van to go to the bathroom, he scares up a huge fur-covered animal that was about 50 yards away. He yells for Chuck, and the 2 men watched the 12-foot tall, hair-covered creature with glowing red eyes run towards the western edge of the job site. It was bipedal and ran hunched over with hands that hung to its knees. They claimed it jumped atop a 15-foot mound of earth in just one jump and continued in the direction of a flood drainage pond and quickly vanished. The 2 drove to a payphone and called 911. Anne Arundel police responded. The responding officer saw an unidentified animal and found a single human-shaped footprint about 15 to 20 inches long. Mall officials had the Maryland Department of Natural Resources come out to examine the construction site and provide an official explanation. The Department of Natural Resources' conclusion was that a black bear had wandered into the construction area. The 2 witnesses, Jerry and Chuck, found this laughable. I personally have been to Arundel Mills Mall because Bass Pro was there and my dad goes there, and it's a big family outing to go to Bass Pro Shop. The area is so overdeveloped, I'm not really sure how a Bigfoot or even a bear could be around there completely unseen. I mean, it's really built up. The mall is huge, and I think even back when the mall was being built, it was a developed area, so I'm not really sure where a bear would even come from. I have a lot of research and investigating to do. Sykesville is only about 40 minutes away from my current location. As I said, Patapsco Valley State Park is a place that I have spent a lot of time, mostly as a kid, but I got married there. And since most of these sightings seem to happen down in that area, and there's also mention of UFOs and paranormal activity in the area as well, I'm thinking I'm going to have to do a little bit of research, digging, head down those areas, check out the areas, and see what I might be able to scare up. Hopefully I don't scare up anything, or I'm going to scare myself to death. But it sounds like it might make for a pretty interesting excursion, and possibly a little short bonus episode of what we might find out. Also, there is camping available at Patapsco Valley State Park, and I might possibly plan one of our family camping trips around a little bit of investigation. But don't tell my husband. So that's going to do it for this episode. As always, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or at lurkpodcast.com, where you can find links to our social media accounts. We have merch available at lurkpodcastmerch.com. And if you have a story you'd like to share, send it to us at lurkpodcast@yahoo.com or via direct message on any of the social media platforms. I want to stress, I hope everybody has a fantastic New Year's Eve. Do not, under any circumstances, drink and drive. Have a designated driver, call an Uber, call a cab, whatever, walk home, but don't get behind the wheel if you've had anything to drink. I'll be making sure I won't be out partying, but I will be staying up to make sure that 2021 gets the hell out of here. I've had enough of it. I think everybody's had enough of it. It seems like it's been one giant year since 2020. It hasn't ended. So I'm hoping that 2022 brings with it a little bit more hope, a little bit calmer lifestyle, and just better things for everybody. So until next time, keep lurking.